Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Tuesday, January 20th, 2026, and today we are talking about wetlands and agriculture going fisticuffs, but not really, not necessarily, using legumes to fertilize heavy feeders, and I will break down my favorite garden hose in my context, so let's do it. All right, everyone, welcome to Tilth Tuesday, your weekly reminder that you can get living soil compost and potting mixes from the Bonafide nerds over there at Tilth Soil. Check out Nathan on the Composter Podcast, Season 4, Episode 3, or head to tilthsoil.com to learn more. I hope everyone is doing well this week and that your Januaries are off to a good start, or almost to a good close. Whatever that may look like for you, it is currently 8 degrees Fahrenheit. That's like negative 13 Celsius here, so not a lot of growing going on. Not a lot of growing. Yeah. I did manage to get some work done yesterday, surprisingly, even with like my eyes watering and tears freezing to my face. Adding some collars around some trees that I just never really got around to last year when I was putting the trees in, but somehow are still okay, so that's good. And adding a little leaf mulch around them just to block the weeds. I will have to fully remulch them again in the summer probably. I mean, the leaves will help, but they'll probably also largely blow away. But hopefully I will have some wood chips by then, trying to manifest that over the next few months. I can usually get at least one wood chip drop per year here, so I'm feeling hopeful, but, manifest. Otherwise, today is going to be a bit tougher to accomplish much outside. I do have some burn piles that need burn piling, so that's tempting. Anyway, all right, today I thought we could start out just talking about wetlands and agriculture, both historically but also futurely, for the future. Now, I've talked about the difficulty of our new farm now in season 6, so I guess at some point I can stop calling it new. But anyway, it's a very wet place, this farm. Not exactly wetlands, at least not where the gardens are, but I'll get to that in a minute. But not all that far off either. It is wildly wet in this area up to the point that I've had to orient our growing beds to actively drain the water out of them. And indeed, I think if I was to talk to an agronomist, and ask them what to do about all the wetness, they would say that I should probably find ways to release the water and allow the soil to drain. In fact, that is often the advice I give to people. If your land does not drain well, you are going to struggle to grow vegetables, and you will have to find some way to drain it. If you want to grow veggies there, you kind of have to. Now, however, if someone asked a person indigenous to that area what to do about the poor drainage situation, they would probably say, well, don't put gardens there. Not that you can't produce food, but just maybe not the stuff you currently grow, or at least not all of it. Obviously, with the way the world is designed, we don't have much choice in that. We get the land that we can afford, and we have to make do, and some of it won't be well draining. But anyway, wetlands. I've been fascinated by wetlands for a while now. As you know, I have a thing for agroecology and ecological restoration, so I thought I would talk a bit about wetlands, the value of them, and maybe rethink how we engage with them from a historical and agricultural and ecological perspective. First, wetlands are incredible ecosystems, marshes, swamps, bogs, etc. Not only can they be incredible carbon sinks, think like peat bogs, but healthy wetlands actively cool the air temperature in ways that other forms of agriculture and land management simply cannot. To the carbon sink point, many ecologists say like healthy wetlands can sequester more carbon than any other landscape, sometimes referred to as nature's kidneys. It's fun. Wetlands are often found in and around larger bodies of water, such as a floodplain near a river, which can enable them to filter large amounts of water, filter out chemicals, filter out excess nutrients, all those things. Not to mention the diversity is unreal. Birds, fish, amphibians, so much life. And that sort of brings us back to agriculture, where we have mostly just drained the wetlands, usually through large drainage ditches, thus draining the biodiversity and or cutting it off from larger water systems, and more efficiently moving pollution out into the larger waterways, no longer filtering that water through aquatic plants. No longer sequestering that carbon, but rather releasing the stores of it as the wetlands dry up. Wetlands also have a significant ancient history of food production, of native rices and millets, of fishing, of hunting and foraging and gathering reeds and other useful plants. In some areas, they still do that, of course, though through much of the world, these wetlands have been drained and reimagined as farmland for their abundant fertility. Historically, though, wetlands were abundant areas where people indigenous to those areas would set up shop on higher ground around them, perhaps placing their gardens in, those drier areas, and then used the wetlands for their incredible abundance. Now, what does that have to do with us today? Well, for one, I guess I hope to help reshape our perspective on this type of landscape. In fact, I have a small area at the bottom of our property where I never go because it's so wet and it's frankly kind of hard to get to. But now I'm wondering if I could maybe do some work on it, or maybe even get an ecologist to help me enliven it a bit, as I've kind of just, let it be for the last few years while we get our farm established. Also, I hope perhaps folks with heavily drained wetlands would consider finding economically reasonable, of course, ways of doing that same sort of thing, of bringing some of that ecology back. I think as someone who has worked in this industry for well over a decade and a half now, I have a somewhat ingrained aversion to soggy land in general. But the more that I read about these wetlands and their potential, the more that is shifting for me. So hopefully I can do a little of that for you. And no doubt we have some ecologists or just general nerds on here who can talk more about wetlands in the comment section. How can we employ them more? How can we engage more with our wetlands in our areas and agriculture, improve them, give them a place in our world? Because I think perhaps now more than ever, wetlands are an ecosystem we really need more of, while at the same time, they continue to see rapid decline. Anyway, I put some links in the show notes of interesting wetland stuff that I was reading this weekend, and I'd love to hear what you all think. Otherwise, it's break time. When we come back, employing cover crops to fertilize specific crops, BRB, which stands for beans, rye, brassicas. Little known fact. That isn't true. It's actually beans, rice, broccoli. Yep. BRB.
Brian here at Snowflake Farm. Well on the way to turning our place into a pick your own. Got 240 blueberry plants coming and about 400 linear feet of beds that's about to be covered in hay mulch and then 10-ounce burlap. Hopefully to never see the daylight again.
Today's episode is brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud supporter of Growers Daily. At Johnny's, they do more than sell seeds. They grow them. They trial them to see how they perform on Johnny's research farm in Maine and across the U.S. and Canada. Only the best varieties are added to their catalog and website. When you need proven varieties you can count on and detailed guidance from seedling to harvest, consider Johnny's your trusted growing partner. JohnnySeeds.com. That's JohnnySeeds.com. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Ian at Grindstone Farms, who writes, quote, using legume crops as cover/fertilizer. This past season, I had around 4-foot beds I needed to cover quickly, and I also had a desire for one last batch of dilly beans, so I planted jade much more tightly than I typically would, and then cut every other row, trying to time up the root nodule growth so that the bed would have some extra fertility in seasons to come. The canopy choked out emerging weeds well, and I still ended up with a lot of beans. Triple whammy. Fast forward to this year, and Ian says they're considering using the same idea, but involving tomatoes. Ian goes on, a row bush of beans straddling trellis tomatoes in a wider bed seems like a great way to at least cover what the tomatoes don't, in addition to bringing in pollinators, but I don't recall hearing anyone doing this. Are there considerations I'm missing here? Thoughts of nitrogen-rich root nodules? Will they break down in time to be available? How do you/could you utilize the cover beans to fertilize with the root nodules in a more systematic way season after season? Thanks again for everything you do, end quote. All right, so interesting question here, Ian, and there are a few important considerations. The idea kind of being growing beans, cutting some of them back, and then planting the tomatoes into the space where maybe they were cut back to take advantage of some of that nitrogen. So there are a few important considerations. The first is the physical interaction above ground, growing beans and tomatoes together, and then the interaction below ground involving the root nodules, moisture, etc. So first, let's just start above ground. The one big challenge with longer season multi-harvest crops like beans around tomatoes, and maybe one of the reasons that you don't hear a lot about them, the same thing sort of applies to things like basil, is simply convenience. It ain't easy to harvest tomatoes behind a fat, happy bean plant. Not to mention the airflow issue in the field could produce disease issues that you may or may not want. I would guess probably don't want. The beans could benefit a little bit from the diffused light from the tomato plants, but it might also reduce the yields if it's too shady. Now, if you're, really space them out, in the row, I could see it being fine on the above ground end and not too complicated. It's the below ground you'd have to pay extra attention to in that situation. On the root nodule thing, there are many factors at play, such as temperature, moisture, maturity of the nodules, etc. But assuming the legumes have, fixed the nitrogen and then you've killed them before the beans are set, the release of that nitrogen is relatively slow and will take place over the course of the season, according to the research, starting maybe a few weeks after you killed them. This, of course, could be a desirable thing for long season heavy feeders like tomatoes. As for the beans that you plan on sort of leaving growing, assuming the proper rhizobium are present or the beans are inoculated, they will produce most of the nitrogen that they need, so that they won't be, taking it from the tomatoes. Now, they will start to compete on moisture, so additional or at least vigilant irrigation must be applied to ensure both crops are happy. Operating at different levels of the soil, with tomatoes being primarily a deeper rooted crop, nutrient competition will still be a factor, but perhaps not quite as much as if they did not have the root complementarity, meaning the roots growing at different soil levels. They are more complementary than antagonistic. It's something I kind of go into in the Living Soil Handbook, just FYI. Even still, the soil should be well balanced and rich because tomatoes are a heavy feeder and beans need things other than nitrogen. So I think it could work, though perhaps there are more convenient crops for the edges of beds. Perhaps it's beans or another legume in the middle of the bed that you kill before planting the tomatoes. Peas perhaps make more sense timing-wise because you'd be planting those in the spring, but you could do the beans the year before or late in the fall, and then, like you said, kind of let that mature over the winter and start releasing that nitrogen for the tomatoes in the spring. But anyway, I'm a fan of lettuces on the sides of beds, green onions, beets, turnips, radishes, carrots, that sort of stuff that just kind of fully comes out. But all of that said, tomatoes are fairly easygoing and put up with a decent amount of interplanting combinations. So I guess why not beans? Anyway, I hope that was helpful. Listeners, let us know your thoughts. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, a good old-fashioned hoedown. That sounds fun. Be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by High Mowing Organic Seeds. High Mowing Organic Seeds is celebrating their 30th anniversary with 48 fabulous new varieties for 2026. Highlights include downy mildew-resistant cucumbers, a poppy that looks like cotton candy, and 12 new tomato varieties. High Mowing offers more than 750 varieties of certified organic, non-GMO vegetables, flowers, herbs, and cover crops, all trialed for optimal performance in organic growing systems. High Mowing has the professional quality seeds and supportive grower reps to get you from seed to harvest. Visit highmowingseeds.com to request a catalog and use code 26NOTILL, all caps, for 10% off your order of $100 or more. That's highmowingseeds.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Ohio Earth Food. So you got your soil tested or need your soil tested, it's time to contact Ohio Earth Food. Since 1972, they have been growers' trusted source for organic soil amendments to apply before you plant to prevent those deficiency symptoms that limit production. Their knowledgeable staff have all been a part of certified organic operations and can help you choose the best products for your soil and deliver or ship them right to your farm. With locations in Northwest Ohio and just north of Madison, Wisconsin, Ohio Earth Food wants to be your partner for organic inputs. Don't count on luck this year. Start your seeds in the Seed Catapult potting soil and put their Revita fertilizers in your beds, and rest assured that your plants will have all the nutrients, stimulants, and energy for whatever comes their way. Feed your soil and let your soil feed the plants. Visit them at ohioearthfood.com. All right, back to the show. All right, so I love almost nothing more than a good garden tool, and perhaps nothing exemplifies the garden life quite like a cultivating hoe. But there is no shortage of different designs, from the stirrup to the collinear and beyond. So let's just take a minute to talk about and appreciate this long-handled cultivating tool, even in no and low-till settings. The first one I ever really had a lot of experience with is the collinear hoe. Designed and celebrated by Elliott Coleman, the brilliance of this tool is the ergonomics. It is bent at a slight angle so that when you're at the end of the long handle, the hoe itself is flat against the ground. In other words, instead of being perpendicular to the handle, the hoe is bent at around 70-degree angle from the handle, meaning that you don't really have to bend over like you do with some hoes. It's also sharp, making it glide easily through the soil to crack the soil surface and nip weeds in their literal buds. When I started farming on a tillage farm, this was basically the only hoe we used for like 2 acres of management. That and a hilling hoe, which has a bigger blade and is perpendicular to the handle, requiring, again, some bending over to use. There are a few different blade designs for it, like the diamond blade, but the classic flat design is generally my personal preference on the collinear hoe. The genius of the collinear hoe is that you can just stand upright. It's very easy to use. It will not handle super rough soil, so the tilth and quality matters, but for light tillage situations, it's excellent. It's very maneuverable and easy to use. Or so I thought, until I discovered the stirrup or oscillating hoe, or sometimes called hula hoe. The blade on this hoe hangs from a slightly less long-handled handle. It looks like a stirrup and completes a loop around, making it easy to drag through the soil, but strong and ergonomic. This is my favorite personally. It's fine in rough soils, it's great for pathways, and for us on our farm, often is employed to help with bed flips by sharpening the blade and cutting through the previous crop without having to bend over. So yeah, for me, that is like the first hoe that I recommend for people in general. Then you have things like wire weeders. These pseudo hoes come in several different designs, and instead of a blade like on the stirrup hoe, they have a rigid wire that is fixed and can be easily drugged through nice tilth to kill weed seeds without, bringing up new ones so much. I still prefer the stirrup hoe for its versatility, but wire weeding is fast and simple for in-bed cultivation. Now, I should say there are a lot of cultivation tools like tine rake weeders and finger weeders that I will have to just save for another segment because it's a lot to go into. Also, not going to go into wheel hoes here. I'll save that as well. I wanted to just focus on my favorite handheld hoe styles for this segment. Then we will do, some of those others at another time because, time we have on a daily show. Also, I think an infield demo on cultivation technique could be helpful, when it's not like 8 degrees outside. Not a ton of cultivation going on right now. A couple other honorable mentions, though, in the cultivating hoe category are the hook and tooth cultivators. These are like thin single tine hoes that can either be used to like pull a furrow, sort of similar to a digging hoe, or cultivate around crops like carrots that are planted in very close rows. It's very thin, so it gets right in between very closely planted stuff. I would be remiss, though, to not also add in here that a relatively recent innovation, at least commercially, is that there are now interchangeable versions of these tools from a few different tool makers. Basically, the idea with these tools is that you can swap from like a collinear hoe to a wire hoe, and you can keep all of that like on a carabiner on your hip. And so depending on what hoe you need, you just kind of swap them out. So you don't need to buy each hoe, just each head, and then swap them as you need them. There are, of course, other designs out there, and I will be interested to hear what hoe designs that you all have a preference for. We don't use the hoes the same way that we used to when we were more of a tillage farm because we just don't quite have the weed pressure that we did then. But they do still come in handy for things, like I said, like the bed flip, but also just general weed management or maybe, pathways and tunnels, etc. Cultivation is a job that is directly proportionate to your lack of mulch. So as your mulch layers decline or as you disturb the soil, even with things like, the tilther, your weed pressure and need for cultivation kind of goes up. With the different widths and sizes, I find the stirrup hoe definitely gets ample work every season, and it's pretty much the only hoe I need most of the time. Anyway, what say you all? Let me know. Otherwise, I think that's it for this Tilth Tuesday. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. You can learn more about how to do that in the show notes. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors, and if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and my wife Hannah for absolutely everything in the world. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Cheers. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of January, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Miranda LaBeouf. Huge shouts to you, Miranda. Thank you for signing up. All right. So as you may recall, our retired military man, now a hardcore fisherman named Gary, has just discovered something at the edge of his creek. He's discovered that the creek is bone dry, like bone dry. This is weird because it's spring, so it should be actually quite high, if not too high. But it's also weird because the creek is never even a little bit dry, ever, not even in the summer. Low, sure, but dry, no. He can fish it all year round, and this creek is literally like part of why he bought the property to begin with. That, and it's quiet. It's a nice place. This day, however, he can see, like fish stuck in small pools, some of them dead, and just like nothing but dry creek bed. And so he decides to walk upstream and investigate, and that is for tomorrow on Fish or Die. That's dramatic. I'm keeping it. All right. Thanks for watching and/or listening. We'll see you then. Bye.